Thanks very much, Sue Moray, doing a terrific job. We appreciate you being here and we appreciate all the hard work that you do. Ladies and gentlemen, our second speaker is very special to the Capel Vale Conquer Cystic Fibrosis Grand Ball. Kaila Thomas spoke at our first ever ball in 2002 when she was just 17 years of age. She was a crowd favourite and has been invited back by popular demand tonight. We actually last year asked Kaila to be part of our very special 10th year anniversary, but due to her health was suffering deterioration, so thankfully we've got her back again. Can you give her a massive round of applause? Miss Kaila Thomas.
Thanks, Lockie. Good evening, everyone. Tonight I'd like to speak to you about something very close to my heart, my lungs. Many speeches begin with the phrase, "It is great to be here tonight." I don't think, however, it is meant to be taken quite so literally, which is how it applies to me. It really is great to be here. As this time last year, I could not have done what I am doing tonight. I would have needed help walking onto stage due to breathlessness, and I could only have muttered a few words in between coughs. So when I say those words, I genuinely mean it. I am here because a stranger gave me a second chance at life. I am here because of a number of dedicated medical professionals. And I'm here as the voice for those CF sufferers who cannot be here tonight. For many of you, the beginning of my story will be also familiar. I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis when I was 3 months old. At that point, I wasn't gaining weight and the doctors realised I had CF because I was failing to thrive. Until my teenage years, I was doing okay. I was an active child and played lots of team sports. I was on a lot of medication and had to have regular nebulizers and physio, but most of the time I could lead a reasonably normal life. From about the age of 15, I was on intravenous antibiotics regularly, and I started getting worse and worse bowel infection that put me in hospital for longer and longer and much more regularly. I was just deteriorating. Once I finished school, I got a full-time job, but it wasn't long before I had to cut down my hours because I was just too exhausted working an entire week. I had to stop making plans because I so often cancelled them, because I was either too tired or too unwell to go out. Small things like showering became huge obstacles. My cousin would have to come to my house and wash my hair because I just couldn't manage it by myself. When I would walk from the train to work, I'd see a bench 10 metres ahead of me and think, if I just make it that far, I can sit down and have a rest. Coughing until I vomited became the norm. One day I was coughing so hard I heard something snap. I was in excruciating pain, so I got Mum to rush me to the hospital. Every bump on the way was agony. They told me I had broken some ribs. Broken ribs are painful at the best of times, let alone when you're having regular coughing fits. My lungs were functioning at about 15%, and I was put straight on oxygen. My mum had to push me around in a wheelchair because I was too tired to walk. I fell asleep in the waiting room because I didn't even have the energy to stay awake. I had to be admitted to hospital, but even on oxygen, sitting in a wheelchair and a few broken ribs, I was still adamant I'd be okay and could do my treatment from home. Luckily, Sue knew best and I was found a bed straight away. I was on oxygen constantly, with IV antibiotics and intensive physio for about 2 months. I was lucky enough to come home for Christmas Day, but was straight back in on Boxing Day and I rang in the new year with my nurse filling in my IV pump. Once I was released, a week later, I ended up in a different hospital. My quality of life had decreased so dramatically that I underwent evaluation to see if I was eligible for a double lung transplant. I was in hospital for a week and had lots of different tests to make sure not only my lungs were unwell enough, but also that the rest of my body was healthy enough to handle such a huge operation. On the 4th of February 2010, I was placed on the waiting list for a double lung transplant. I was determined to be as healthy as I could when the call finally came, so I got a personal trainer and exercised 3 times a week. I had to wear my oxygen and was limited, but I did what I could. People often ask me how I felt while I was waiting and what I was looking forward to doing. I think they expect huge goals, but the truth was, all I wanted to do was laugh without coughing. I wanted to walk my dog, to go out with my friends and dance, to go shopping, just to breathe without having to think about it. Being on the waiting list for a transplant is scary. I know people who have waited for 2 years and someone who waited 2 days. It's just what becomes available. There's so much to take into consideration with a matchup: blood type, tissue type, size, and quality. At about 3:30 a.m. on the 30th of August 2012, 2.5 years after I originally went on the list, I was awakened to a beeping noise. I could hardly believe it and almost didn't want to check my pager. Once I did, I called the hospital and was told they had a compatible pair of lungs for me. From that moment, I had a roller coaster of emotions. I burst into tears. I felt shock, relief, happiness, fear, and devastation for the family who had just been through something so tragic, but were now about to save my life. The next few hours felt longer than the entire 2.5 years I'd been waiting. First, we bundled into the car and stopped off at Nan and Pop so that they could give me a hug. It all feels like a bit of a blur now, until the last part, where at 9 a.m, after blood tests, x-rays, dressing in a super flattering hospital gown with paper underwear, I was finally told that the lungs were a definite match and I was wheeled to surgery. Being put under was probably the scariest moment of my life. Not knowing what was next was terrifying. And then I could breathe. Well, not immediately. The operation took about 8 hours, and when I woke up, I had tubes coming out of everywhere, including my throat, which apparently really aggravated me because I couldn't speak. I desperately wanted to know the time. I must have been missing something important. When my ventilator came out, I still couldn't breathe properly. I couldn't get the hang of breathing deeply and was still taking my shallow CF breaths. I never thought I'd have to be taught how to breathe. For the next 5 days, I was in ICU. I stayed in hospital for 2 weeks after that and then was allowed to go home. It was exciting, but also a little scary. Having a transplant is a bit like swapping one set of problems for another. My body was and is still so immunosuppressed that I ended up back in hospital twice with chest infections. I also had a bout of slight rejection, which devastated me because I ended up in hospital for my birthday once again when I finally thought I was well. After those hurdles though, bit by bit, I got better. I walked my dog. I laughed and didn't cough. I walked to the seat I used to have to stop at and didn't stop. I kept walking. I went shopping a lot, so luckily I also went back to working full time. I feel like when I was unwell, I missed so many years of my life, so I have a lot to catch up on. In the past year, I've done things I never thought I'd be able to do. I climbed Jacob's ladder. I participated in a fun run. I flew to Exmouth and went snorkeling. Sorry. And I flew to Sydney to meet my newest godson. I've also received the greatest gift that anyone could ever receive, and I'll never be able to thank the person who gave it to me. I'd love to thank my donor's family, because I don't know anything about them. It's quite a daunting concept. I don't know who this person is, or whether they had a family, had kids, or were married, but they did something so incredible and profound that I feel like I should know them, what they did, what they enjoyed doing. Organ donation can change someone's life. Some cystic fibrosis patients will die waiting, but it doesn't need to be that way. It's so important to sign up to organ donation and to tell your loved ones if you have. It's the best gift you can give. My boyfriend didn't have to watch me be buried. My parents didn't have to lose their daughter. My friends didn't have to say goodbye. None of that happened because of that one incredible person who did something amazing. Tonight we are here to celebrate the gift of life. I pay tribute to the stranger who gave me my life back and to the medical professionals who made my lung transplant possible. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for helping us find a cure so that people with CF can breathe without thinking about it. Everybody deserves that. Courage is nothing more than going one step further than you think you can. When you have CF, that step seems a long way. Tonight, though, we can look back and say, look how far we have come. Thank you.